Welcome to yet another tutorial, part 2 of learning to use the alpha masks in Poser and getting them to work for you. If you've seen the first video, then this video is for you. Let's get started here. First thing we're going to do, those of you who are following along, you should have a folder called VX, or you know what, I don't know what I'm going to call this when I finish it, but here's the files that I'm using. These are the files you need. You will not be getting this file or this folder. You'll just get these files that are highlighted here. You know what? You're not going to get these either. Come to think of it. You're only going to get the maps. So that'll allow you to follow along. Either that or you can use your own maps. It's not a big deal either way. Sorry about what's going on in the background. It has nothing to do with me. But it's going to be loud. So I apologize for that. For those of you wondering what it is that we'll be working on, last time we worked on making this face with this makeup. That got completed, and now we're going to take the same face and add makeup to it to achieve this or a similar effect. And we're going to be doing this exclusively in Poser. Before we begin, please note these opportunities and efforts will not operate in DAZ 3D Studio at all. I can't help you with it, and I'm sorry if you send me questions. I can't answer them about DAZ Studio. I'd love to be able to help. I just can't. I have an old computer. It can't run DAZ. Yes, I know some of you see this DAZ install manager, but unfortunately it can't run anything from DAZ. It's just too old, and you have to have a better graphics card than I have. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so here we are inside Poser. I'm using Poser 9. The only thing that requires Poser 9 that I used is the subsurface scattering. You can use that or not. And I used a normal map. You can use that or not. Excluding those two things, everything else we're doing will work in all the versions of Poser from 5 up. So let's get started. Same layout as last time, only I moved my diffuse maps over here. So I'm going to move those back up here. My diffuse setup is here. So that's my diffuse setup. Anyway, all right, so the next thing I need to do is think, hey, I've got makeup, I want to add it. So I want to make a new node. But actually what I'm going to do is just paste. Because I need to bring in that map. This is the mask here. Sorry, not the mask, but the makeup. Now I need to bring the mask in, so I'm going to paste that in. I'm doing this first before I do anything else. I'm telling you, it was actually quiet before I started this video. And the second I start recording, it gets so loud. Okay, every time. Never fails. Alright, here's Blender node. You remember what that's for. So what we're going to do, if you use subsurface scattering, you're going to be plugging that into input 1. That's your skin, of course. And if you use just the image map, of course, then you'll be plugging that into image 1. I use subsurface scattering, so I'm plugging that into image number 1. Your makeup is what you'll be blending on top of your skin, so you're going to put that into input 2. And you want to have your blending set to 1. Right now you only see what's in input 2. What you want to do is use the alpha mask for exactly what it's for. Make the white show up and the black disappear. So the white, if you look in the diffuse map here, is all the makeup, and the black is empty space. So what we're going to do is take the alpha mask, plug it into blending, and boom, ta-da! That's actually it for getting the two put together. So there's no special secret to that. Just pop it in, and as you can see, you get this horrible looking effect here. That looks terrible. So let me disconnect the normal map. So what you see when you look at this immediately is that you get an effect here where the mask and the actual makeup doesn't really have shadows applied to it the way it should. The yellow here is the same as the yellow here, the same intensity. So what we're going to do is say, oh, you know, that's not going to work. So I'm showing you troubleshooting here so you kind of figure out what it is that went wrong and you can go back and fix it. When you're working with that, the way to fix that is to take your image map. That's here. And what you're going to do is use your blending node to blend this map with your makeup and then plug it into subsurface scattering. So click that here. Subsurface scattering. There's not really a point in looking at it, but plug it in there. And when you plug it in now, you'll see that it has a little bit better intensity and it takes the shadow. So you see? And that's the point of having just one infinite light in your scene, so that you don't have, well, so that you can see highlights, you can see shadows, and you can make sure that shadows actually work on your scene. If you're a vendor or just anyone working, if you don't do this and have just one infinite light in your scene, or just a few very important lights, what you end up with is a false idea of how light works on your material, and looks terrible at the end result. Any kind of lights will just mess your work up. So you always want to work from just one light and make sure that everything works properly. One light will give you that advantage, one infinite light. Don't use a spotlight or something. Just one infinite light, keep it in scene in your set. So once that's done, so here's my diffuse, and now that's plugged in. Let me move my mask up in here. Okay, since we've got just one mask, I'll show you a really quick trick. If you ever need to invert that mask, what you can do is go to color math here. If for any reason you need to invert pretty much anything, just put that in there and hit subtract. As you can see, ta-da, two opposite things. Yes, you can do that with your image maps. You can do this with anything. I'm just showing this to you really quick in case you ever need to do it. See? I don't know. There's reasons why you might need to do that, but I'm going to show it to you because I know some of you are going to want to do some more advanced things than what I'm showing, and some of you have already figured all this stuff out and you don't need my help. And you're going to want to flip that mask instead of making another mask, because that's just silly. It just takes up more space on people's hard drive, and there's just no point in that when you can just do it with a simple node switch. Okay, now that I'm done babbling, let's get back to work. So your subsurface scattering is hooked up for your diffuse. Again, make sure your diffuse value here is 0. Don't have your speculars hooked up, no ambience, none of that blah 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 stuff. Just your bumps and your displacements, all your regular stuff. And I, again, have to turn off my normal map for those of you that didn't watch the first video, because if I don't, I get that effect. So, okay, so now that the makeup has been applied, we have the issue of the makeup having no effect. So I'm going to quickly apply this to everything, you know, with the normal map applied. And I will show you what that yields. And while this renders, and as I'm setting it up, I can explain to you that when you normally get products from vendors, they haven't set up the makeup to look like makeup on bump maps. So the surface model for that figure will usually look the same as the skin. So the makeup looks the same as the skin. It doesn't look like the makeup has any cracks in it. It doesn't look like the makeup is dry. It doesn't look like the makeup is wet. It doesn't have any sort of different specularity than the skin. In other words, it looks unrealistic, unreliable in your scene, and it's pathetic. We're all used to getting products like that. We're used to working that way, in Poser at least. And that's, you know, it's not acceptable. If you're watching this, you're thinking you need to advance. So let's all advance. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands that as we go forward. This is for those people who are looking to have more realism. If you're used to buying products and making products where that doesn't matter to you, and let's face it, it doesn't matter to most anyone, because everyone's used to getting the lower tier of what's possible. But I'm hoping by posting these videos that people say, oh wow, you know, I never noticed that the makeup wasn't shiny, the makeup wasn't cracked, the makeup wasn't raised off the skin the way it was supposed to be. But those are things that should happen, because that's what makeup does. I mean, it's not all a powder base. You can pick up pretty much any fashion magazine and see that, yes, makeup looks like makeup. And that's the effect we're going for here. And as we do, the more realistic, the better. So that's why in this junction, we're going to be adding reflection to the makeup. We're going to be adding its own specularity separate from the skin. Specularity that's separate from the lip specularity. So the specularity on the lips will have more intensity than the specularity on the makeup. and a different type of specularity. So skin, makeup, lips don't all have to share the same specularity. This is another issue that we're all used to seeing, and we accept it and we think it's normal and everything's okay. Or the lips have just a slight more better intensity than usual. All in all, it's just something we're used to, and we shouldn't accept it. We should want more, look for more, and provide more. So going forward, let's all keep that in mind. I'm keeping it as mind because I'm trying to stall while my slow computer tries to render this scene. Poor little computer. It can't handle it. A smarter person would have paused their video, but not me. I refuse to give up. And that's how I ended up learning how to do this stuff. My gosh. And if anyone's wondering, you know, if I increase my bucket size, it wouldn't render any faster. Believe me, I've tried. It doesn't go any faster. Anyway, as usual, if there's questions about how this is done, or if I'm not showing a technique that you'd like to know, please let me know and I will work on that. For those of you that didn't watch the first video, this is not Victoria 4's head. This is a prop of Victoria 4's head. I chose to work on this because I don't want to be constantly flipping back and forth to different material zones. I only want to work on just the material zone for this demo, and that's it. And we wait and we wait. Anyway, you can see from what's here that, look at that, the skin and the makeup have the same specularity. They're both using bleen right now, and you know, no one's makeup looks exactly like skin, not even the makeup that's supposed to look like skin. And let's assume that we don't want this makeup to look exactly like skin. We want it to look different. So, building on what we learned before, we'll go forward and do even more. So, there it is. So, and as you recall, this is more or less what it's supposed to look like when it's done. You can see from this. Okay, let's get that done. Usually you want to keep your mask open, you're going to keep using it. Okay, so let's add a reflection in there, and the fastest way to do that is just add reflection. Move all your reflection stuff out of your way. Take your mask and plug it in right there. What that does is it makes only your makeup have a reflection. At that point, then you can start setting your various, well, you can set all this however you like, actually. I usually just leave it the way it is or just change it a little bit. So here we go. I'm going to keep my reflection stuff over here and out of my way. Usually I want to keep the one that I'm working on top there. So there's reflection, paste it in there, and I've got my mask paste popped in right there. And as long as that's connected, you're doing great. Some of you might want to add the full lips. As you can see, my lips, what I did is I only have some of the lips actually worked on. I've got a mask that makes the lip a strange shape, and that's only where the makeup is applied. But the actual lip isn't set up that way. The actual lip covers the whole lip, and you can see how this looks here. This little triangle shape is kind of like, that's what my makeup is actually covering. My actual makeup isn't covering the actual lip, it's only here. So you can see the lip has one sort of nice natural tone here, and then it has a makeup feel and a makeup specularity right here. And there's a bit of a reflection, same as you can see with the eyelid there, where that's applied. So that's why we're doing it this way. Realism. Alright, so let's see. All that stuff's done. Specularity is set up. So the next thing we're going to want to set up is giving this some texture to it. And I mean surface texture, you know, not diffuse texture. So as you can see, there's little bumps in there, irregularities. So I did that last time, so I'm going to do that again this time, and I might even set up some cracks in there. So I'm going to go for 3D textures. You can use pretty much any of these. Usually I go for noise. and I want to add noise to another one. Put that with a blender node. You know, not even a blender node. Let's try math. That way I have a bit more control over what I'm doing. So you're essentially just mixing up whatever you think might look good. You know, not marble. Let's try turbulence. Let's set that at 1. We don't want to add it. We want to subtract it. Yeah, so this is good. So what that was just creating the surface effect of how the surface of the makeup will look when it's applied. So it'll make these little dots and these things like that. If you wanted to make cracks, things like that, then you would use other 3D variables for your nodes, which we're not going to be doing. We're just going to do this kind of quick. So then let's see what happens if we just plug it straight into bump map and just set the into our bump setting, and then just set that at 1. Forget it, you know what, it's set at the default number, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and render this, apply to all. I'm going to render this and not make you guys sit through it this time. I will be changing these settings though, my goodness. Yeah, that is explaining a lot. I don't need all that. Okay, so I'm going to render this and then let you guys see what it looks like. Alright, so here we have a render of our very special looking girl. Not at all pleasant to look at. Let's make her prettier, shall we? Alright, so as you saw from that render, the bump has displaced itself all over the place. Let's go to here and lower that setting. First of all, let me get rid of this so I can at least see. Let's try 0.003, enter. That's a little better. That's a bit much. It's better off where I was, wasn't it, people? Alright, let's try 0.7. Yeah, that'll do it. Okay, so anyway, this is the bump that we're using for the makeup. The issue that we're having is that this bump effect that we've got going on here is applying itself everywhere. So how do we fix that? Well, folks, we use a mask. We want the bumps to only apply inside the makeup area and not all over the face or anywhere else. So we're going to, well, you know what, there's a lot of ways we could do this, but we're going to try what we've been using, since you guys know that method, is the blender method. This may or may not work. We're going to set this at 1. Now, as some of you might recall, what it usually picks up is whatever's in input number 2. So we're going to put this math node into here. Then we're going to put the mask here. Oh my goodness, look. Okay, so that looks like it works. And then we're going to put this into the bump. Ta-da! Okay, so anyway, like I said, this intensity might be a little too much. It actually looks like it is, but that's fine. I'm going to keep this open while it renders again, and then we'll see just how this looks. Don't forget your normal map. For those of you using one, apply to all, and go back here and render again. Alright, so there it is now, and as you can see, you don't have the bump map placed all over the place. See? Bump map everywhere, or bump settings everywhere, and now it's only on the makeup. Only on the makeup, only on the makeup. To give that a bit more of an effect before we did that, let's see what it looked like before we even added the bump. As you can see, totally smooth. It looks exactly like the skin. No difference in surface texture whatsoever. And now it has its own little surface texture. Huzzah! And like I said, you can build that up any way you like. The issue, however, here is that the settings that I used made it a negative value, the whole bump setting. So what it's actually doing is carving the skin. It should be raised up off the skin, not carved into the skin. That's why I'm getting these little ridges. And so what I would do is then go change the settings. I'd go over that too, but the bottom line is that basically this here is going to turn white and blah blah. So let me go back here. You could even do add if you want to. See how much that changed. Shove this guy over here while I'm working. There's divide. So now I've got it set up a different way. I just use divide instead of whatever the Hillshire Farms that I had set up a second ago. Let me go ahead and render that one so that you can see it. Apply to all. And then you guys can see how that looks. Alright, so here you go. Here it is rendered out. And as you can see, now as I said, its own texture, its own specularity, it's set up all by itself. Looks different from the skin now, and that's what we want. Same thing here. And it takes light and shadow the way that it's supposed to. Also good. However, this isn't the settings or the way that I finalized, but it works for the demo. For those of you following along, you can actually go inside of your tutorial there, and you can do the default or the makeup. This part you would apply the makeup and see how that works, and that would actually get you the settings that I used. And I actually think that I used a color math node to blend things together instead of a blender. Here I did a blender for the bump, but I might have actually used different in my final setup. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and apply my final setup, and we can look at what I did there. Click that off. Yeah, I used a color math. That's what I figured. So as you can see, a lot different than what I was showing you guys before. And I used turbulence and noise, came up with this value. Instead, pop that in here and multiplied it with the mask. All in all, I think that came out a lot better than what I was showing you in the demo. There's always different ways of doing things, and as I said, when you find a way to work, keep at it and only alter if you need to. But the way that you do things is going to be your hallmark. People know you for it. People know me for my masks and the way I set things up in the material room, and they know me for doing weird stuff. But you know, however you do things, strictly for you. Change it only when you need to. I think, yeah, this is all set up pretty much the same way, except I lowered the reflection value, changed the way my reflection was set up. As you can see, I did make alterations here for my reflection that I hadn't made in the demo. And I went ahead and I did the specularity for this, which I hadn't shown, but that is exactly all it is exactly the same thing we'd just done. What I did was I think I gave the makeup a specularity for anisotropic. Let me see, just to make sure. Yep, that's what I did. I made anisotropic and I shoved that into a blender node of what we'd done earlier, well, in the past. In the past, we'd done the bleed and the glossy for just the lips, and then I just added in anisotropic in here. Kaboom, and then hit that with the mask. Let's make sure that's the mask I'm looking at. Yeah, hit that with the mask in a blender node and plug that into the specular value. And that gave us the result of the render that I'm about to show you. Aside from that, I didn't change anything else. And hit render. Alright, so there you see it. This is how it looks with the setup that you get in the included files. So this is what I got doing the demo. Has issues, and I worked through those issues, and it now looks a lot better. For instance, I made the white border of my mask, which is what's producing this white border. I made it a lot more subtle by tweaking the settings. Which settings? Wow. I think your guys are going to have to be testing and figuring things out on your own, which is the important thing. Let me give you this quick hint here, or tip. Whatever your diffuse mask is, your diffuse is, for your makeup or whatever you happen to be overlaying, your mask needs to be a slight bit smaller. Otherwise, if you do the mask and the diffuse texture the same size in Photoshop or whatever you're working with, what you end up with is this little white border. That's stupid. So, you know, come in about a little bit of a centimeter there and you should be fine. It depends on what you're working on, but remember your mask should be a little bit slimmer than your actual, and then you should be fine. So demo version, actual version, demo version, actual version. And once you've got your actual version, then you start doing your renders with all of your different lights. That's when you mess with your other lights and then see how it looks. And that's when you know if things are done correctly or not. So here's one that's included with Poser. I will render with that. Alright, so here's how it looks with this new light done. It's an ambient occlusion light, so that works. Alright, with your antivirus stuff. Anyway, so that's how it looks here, and that's fine. Usually you want to test with your actual just one infinite light, and that way you get a better idea of what's going on. If there's any problems, it's a lot easier to move just one light than moving multiple lights in a scene. One more thing I'm going to show you before I get out of here, before this tutorial is done, but before I do that, let me go back to my old light. And that's to give your end users something to play with. You know what? I just messed that all kinds of up. Alright. What we're going to do here is just change the, where is it? The makeup to another color. The way you do that, you know what? Let's do it this way. Make a new node. HSV. Hue to 2. Saturation probably up. Okay, so what you do is just scrub through this, and you know what? I did this backwards. There we go. Anyway, as you can see, this will change the color. Let me put these right next to each other. Like so, like so, like so, like so. You know, you do this. That gets you different colors than what you had initially. You know, and some of you like that. And your vendors, your end users will like that you do this because it keeps their hard drive space free for more important things. So if you have the exact same makeup and all you're doing is just changing the makeup color, you know, like if you're just doing lips and you're changing the color of the lips and the specularity is not changing, things like the texture of it isn't changing, then, you know, just do something like this. It's a lot simpler than doing multiple textures and just taking up hard drive space, and then you have to keep an accounting of all those different maps you made. It's kind of stupid. So if that's all you're doing, then this is the way to do it. A lot smarter and a lot better. So what you do is just follow where you had your original setup. Find out where your mask was plugged in, and then what you're going to do is plug this in. Boop. That takes care of it, and it'll render with that new one, which I will do in just a second. Don't forget to set that up for everything before you go. So, as usual, any questions, comments, please leave those below. If you need anything demoed, let me know, and I will try to do that. Please keep in mind I only have Poser 9. I do have Poser 6, I think 8. Yeah, I have 8. Poser 6 and 8 and 9. I don't have any of the professional level ones, but I can help with that. I've got 3D Max, ZBrush, those sort of things. So if you need a pipeline work through anything like that, let me know. Have a great one, guys.